Shalom. Parasha VaYeirah. Then the Lord appeared. Genesis 18, verse 1 to chapter 22. The Haftarah, it's 2 Kings 4, 137, and also chapter 4, verse 1 to 23 for the Sfaradim. Then the Lord appeared, VaYeirah, to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day, after he got circumcised. So the parasha is very rich again, so I'm just going to summarize it. And it talks about the announcement of the birth of Yitzchak and the destruction of Sodom, Avraham and Avimelech, the birth of Yitzchak and the rejection of Ishmael, the covenant with Avimelech one more time, and we're going to focus on all this, and the Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Yitzchak. So first of all, let's see on the Abraham's intercession and all the 10 divine descents of God on earth. From this intercession of Abraham for the salvation of the 10 righteous, and one more time, this number 10 is very symbolic because it talks to us about the tree of life. The custom to pray into groups of 10, called minyan, in the synagogue or some else was instituted. It's based on this passage when you need 10 men in order to do the complete prayer and to do the Kaddish. Hashem announces that he will come down and see what is happening in Sodom, and the tradition teaches us that he is one of the 10 divine descents. Genesis 3, and they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Song of Songs, my beloved has gone to this garden, to the bed of spices. Genesis 11, but the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. Exodus 3:8, so I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Psalm 18, and he rode upon a cherub and flew, meaning that he went down from his upper realms. Exodus 19, then the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain. Exodus 35, now the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. Number 11, then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him and took the spirit that was upon him. Number 12, then the Lord came down in the pillar of cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle. Zechariah, finally, 14, and in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. All those are anthropomorphism. We cannot take it physically. And by the way, you need to watch the video on he will set his feet on the Mount of Olives to understand what it is about. But by interceding for the salvation of the righteous, Abraham reminds Hashem of his promise of a remnant that will always remain throughout the generations. So this we developed in the studies of Noah, and as usual, I encourage you to register for the study of the Torah. So this talks to us also of something else, much more prophetic. It's the coming of the just one, the righteous one, that is the Messiah. And the story immediately shifts to Lot, from who will come the righteous one. So let's talk about Yitzchak, Lot, and Pesach a little bit. There is a prophetic link between the announcement of the birth of Yitzchak and the story of Lot. The announcement of the birth of Yitzchak is made at Pesach. How do we know this? In Genesis 18 it says, so Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, quickly make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it and make cakes, ugot. The word ugot means flat cake, and it's also used for the unleavened bread, like the matzot of the story of the coming out of Egypt, as we can find the verse Exodus 12:39. It is also the matzot at the same time that Lot offered to the 2 angels. Genesis 19 tells us, but he insisted strongly. So they turned into him and entered his house. Then he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, matzot. So we have the matzot and we have the Pesach time. deliverance time. Lot is saved from the destruction of Sodom by the intercession of Abraham, and he finds refuge with his two daughters in a cave. After drinking, he slept with 2 nights in a row with his daughters, who were in fact scared after the destruction of Sodom, and they thought that they were the only survivors in the world. So they came up with a strategy to repopulate the surface of the earth, that by then sleeping with their father. And 2 nations will come out of this incestuous union, and this event will have tremendous consequences on the divine plan of redemption. The elder first calls her son Moav, which is Me'av. This name means from my father. And the second calls it Ben Ami, which means son of my people, more decent. And Rabbi Yudan say in Rabbi Abu's names, because the firstborn disgraced her father and called his name Moav, which is by my father, she didn't hide it. Scripture commanded in Deuteronomy 2, be not at enmity with Moab, neither contend with them in battle. You may not wage war with them, yet you may divert their rivers and burn their barns in fire. But because the younger spared her father's honor, she called it son of my people, declaring his son of my people, the scriptures said again, Aras, talking about the Ammonite, harass them not contend with them in any way whatsoever. And this spirit of debauchery of Moab, of the first daughter, still animated the daughters of Moab, who were sent to make stumble the sons of Israel. In number 25, we find them. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the woman of Moab. But according to the sages, a deeply spiritual reason moved those two young girls, and we can discern the hand of the Almighty of Israel at work in this dark story of incest. He can make light shine out of the darkness and change the man's history by repentance. And this leads us to talk about the light of Messiah. As it says in Romans 11, for who has known the mind of the Lord, who has become his counselor? His ways are hidden to our understanding, but he works in his story. From the incestuous union with Lot and his daughters came Ruth, the Moabite, ancestor of King David and of the Messiah. Ruth 4:17, also the neighbor woman gave him a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Oved. He is the father of Jesse, father of David, and then Messiah. Matthew 1:5, Salmon begot Boaz by Rachav, Boaz begot Obed by Ruth, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king. Again, and it is from an incestuous union with Boaz from the tribe of Judah, same story, Genesis 38:25. When she was brought out, she sent Tamar to her father-in-law Judah, saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, please determine whose these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff. And both of those unions are associated. In Ruth 4:12, we can read that, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, incestuous relation, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this young woman, Ruth, also coming from incestuous background. And the Rabbi Eli Munk, in his commentary in the Voice of the Torah, quotes Chaim Ben Attar, who resumed beautifully this event. These historical events are certainly not fortuitous. They contain deep meaning, so it is allowed to assume that the future Redeemer of humanity must have in his veins a drop of unclean and non-Jewish blood in order to be able to understand the innermost soul of all human beings, to share their weaknesses, and to be able, through his ascendant and his language, to find the way of their heart and bring them back to God. Of course, we're not talking about impure blood, but this process of tshuva made by the Messiah to bring back the children. He understands all our weaknesses. And the Midrash confirms that the stake of the incense of Lot's daughters was indeed the coming of Messiah. So, Midrash Rabbah. Arise, take thy wife and your two daughters that are found. Robi Tovia, said, two finds would spring from them, Ruth the Moabitess and Naamah the Ammonitess. And Rabbi Isaac commented, I have found David my servant. Where did I find him? In Sodom. Happening with this story of Lot. Then, and the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth. They thought that the whole world was destroyed, as in the generation of the flood. Come, let us make our father drink wine, that we may preserve seed of our father. Rabbi Tanchuma said in Shmuel's name, It is not written that we may preserve a child of our father, but that we may preserve seed of our father. The seed that comes from a different source, which is the King Messiah. And Genesis 19:35, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Allusion to Ruth, descendants of the Moabites, who also laid at his feet until morning of Boaz, and she arose before one could recognize another. Ruth 3:14. It was too early in the historical process for Lot and Boaz to be able to discern the great scope of the act of cohabitation they had just done. Amazing commentary. Very, very close to everything. The truth is just pertaining everywhere. So the Matzot, the birth of Yitzchak on the Nisan 15, the intercession of Abraham, the deliverance of Lot, the destruction of the perverse nation, the ancestor of Ruth, all those events draw a metaphorical picture of redemption perfectly achieved by Israel in Yeshua. And it confirms that the Torah is a prophetic book and is still actual. And it tells of the Messiah Yeshua and points toward him, as it says in Romans 10, for the goal at which the Torah aims is the Messiah, who offers righteousness to everyone who trusts. David Stern translation. Revelation, which is only thick as a veil. How a veil thick? What is the thickness of a veil? It's nothing. It's allowed by Hashem so that the totality of the brothers enter the plan of salvation, but it's also the responsibility of the nation which prevents Israel to recognize their Messiah, who has been totally Christianized and deprived from his Torah. And this leads us to an interpretation of the veil over Sarah, that thanks to God we grasped this understanding through the help of all the different levels of understanding of the Torah, and by the Zohar and by the biblical Kabbalah, which I encourage you to study. It's just amazing the depth of the word that we can find in these sources. So the kidnapping of Sarah, what happened? The episode of the second kidnapping of Sarah, she was kidnapped by Pharaoh and then after by Avimelech, intercalated between the story of Sodom and the birth of Yitzchak, speaks about the destiny of Israel, represented here by Sarah. Abraham must again use the same stratagem as with Pharaoh to save his life because of his wife's beauty. So first of all, let's say that when it says that his sister, he's not talking about the physical aspect of his sister. He's talking about his soulmate. Like it's written in Song of Songs, you are my bride, my fiancée, my sister. So sister is like a unification between a soulmate and another, and also in upper realms. But this is another level. So he's talking about his soulmate. He's talking about his one. They are the same. The custom of the time was indeed to kill the husband of a lasted woman to appropriate her. There was no other way because touching a married woman at the time was totally forbidden, and the interdiction was in effect in all the Middle East. On the other hand, being a brother would bring some advantages and protection. Yitzchak, by the way, acted the same way with Rebecca. So different commentators nevertheless reproach Abraham for having jeopardized his wife's life. But we can discern something much deeper in the patriarch's behavior. We have studied that the life, we study in the yeshiva, if you follow, that the life of Abraham is an image of the destiny of Israel and also the coming of Messiah. And we must draw comparisons and let the Ruach HaKodesh guide us in this midrashic and remez allusing interpretation. Abraham is still anxious to fulfill his mission of announcing the one to the nation. This is developed in the studies of Ler Lecha. He leaves to settle in Gerar, which is in the land of the Philistines, a city at the crossroads of Kadesh and Shur. It was a place of frequent transit because he needed to have people listening to his message. His mission is to bring the good news to the peoples of the earth. The father of the believers goes in search of worshippers. And Sarah allegorically represents Israel and Jerusalem in the word. So now let's quote a pearl from the Zohar for the women. The women. His wife Sarah showed the same devotion to spread the truth in the world by teaching women. As long as Sarah lived, the doors of the tent were always wide open. Thanks to her merit, the cloud of the Shekhinah dwelled above the tent. The light she lit on Erev Shabbat evening, never blew out, and the food of her household was blessed with abundance. And then, come and behold, when a man is at home, the foundation of the house is the wife, because of whom the Shekhinah does not leave the house. As we have learned, it is written that when Yitzchak brought her to the tent of his mother Sarah, the candle was rekindled as it was when Sarah, his mother, was alive. That is because the Shekhinah came to the house for his wife's merit. The Shekhinah, which is the presence of God, dwells in the house because of the wife's merit. So this is why we light the candle on Friday evening. We bring back the light. We're responsible for the light in the house. Now the tent is assimilated to the temple. The cloud above the tent is the divine presence, the Shekhinah, that will dwell in the temple. The Midrash also accounts that the bread did not dry in Sarah's tent, like was the proposition, the bread of the face, which remained fresh for a week in the temple. The tent doors remained opened, like the temple, which will become a house of prayer for all peoples. Sarah was barren, like Israel, described in Isaiah 54. Sing, O barren, you who have not borne, break forth into singing and cry aloud, you have not come labor with child. Something must be hidden in Sarah. What is it? It says in Genesis 20:16, and to Sarah he said, behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, let that be to you a covering of the eyes, kesot enaim, in respect of all that are with thee and with all, and she was reproved. Rabbi Yochanan explained, Avimelech said to Abraham, make you a garment that all may look at it, not at her beauty. A garment of the eyes, meaning one in which she would be covered from the eyes. Avimelech said to him, you cover my eyes, meaning you lie to me, therefore the son that you will beget will be covered of eyes. An allusion to Yitzchak, who didn't see well at the end. So what could be hidden in Sarah? We need to understand there's something that must be hidden in Sarah that nation wants to take. It is the beauty of the Messiah that is hidden in Sarah. This beauty can be unveiled only to the eyes of those who long for a relationship with the Father. It is the glory of Messiah that makes his light shine in the hearts, like it says in 2 Peter. And so we have the prophetic word confirmed, which you do well to heed as a light that shines in the dark place until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts. 2 Corinthians, but even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, whose minds the God of his age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Messiah, who is the image of God, should shine on them. Israel's eyes are still partly veiled, and she doesn't perceive the one to whom the Torah points yet. 2 Corinthians 3, until Moshe, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away. But their minds were blinded. For until this day, the same veil remains unlifted in the reading of the Torah, the Old Covenant. It's not a good translation, because the veil is taken away in the Messiah. But even to this day, when Moshe is read, a veil lies on their heart. Nevertheless, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. But the story is much more complex again than this. Avimelech has Sarah abducted to make her his queen. Sarah represents Israel, the foster mother of the peoples of the earth, the prophecy and the vessel that will carry the promised son. Sarah, who has just received the promise of a son, is abducted by Avimelech, who desired to taint the vessel that will contain the promised child and by extension the promised one. The fight is still the same today. Revelation 12 tells us his tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour a child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child who was to rule nations with a rod of iron. And the child was caught up to God and his throne. No way that God is going to let these things do. But this is the plan. The Messiah, partly dissimulated to Israel by a veil, and one more time, it's a veil, it's not a blanket or a curtain, put in place that time by the nations, Avimelech. The Messiah has been stripped of his nationality and dispossessed of his identification with the nation of Israel through erroneous teaching and doctrine instituted by the church system. These false doctrines and teaching have literally abducted the true heritage and wonderful blessings in store for every believer from the word of God given at Mount Sinai to everyone who wanted to come and drink from it. In keeping with these teaching and doctrines, man has wittingly reduced God's holy Shabbat to significance, taken some mitzvot, kept them, threw away the other one, put the Torah as something like a law, which is not the proper translation, because the translation of Torah is instruction, and then makes what he wanted to do with it. So Israel received a veil, but Avimelech, by doing so, and his kingdom are struck with barrenness. Abraham has to intercede and to pray so that Avimelech and his kingdom could mother again, to give life again. Genesis 27, now therefore restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray Vayitpalel for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours. It is the first time that the word Itpalel, pray, is employed in the scripture. Without Abraham, that is to say, without the doctrine of Abraham, the Torah, even holding Sarah captive by the theology of substitution, which has prevailed for 2,000 years, the church cannot be fruitful. The theology of substitution stole Israel and committed adultery with false doctrine that blemished the source. There cannot be fruit or revival whatsoever without going back to the source, the original source. Israel must remain intact, and Yeshua is symbolized here by Abraham's intercession, intercede for the sons of the whole world and for the sins of the whole world and that of the church, but always through Abraham, to who the vision was entrusted. The same word is employed here in the future. So Abraham will pray, Vayitpalel, and God healed Avimelech, his wife, and his female servants. Then they bore children. At Jacob's well, Yeshua brought back the Samaritan who was also lost in false idolatrous doctrines to the pure source of the word, because Torah and the well symbolizes the purity of the Torah. The key to revival is the Messiah and the Torah. He is the life, and his word is life. Believers of the whole world must go back to the doctrine of Abraham in Yeshua and under the leadership of the Spirit. And as it says, he is a prophet and he will pray for you and you shall live. Israel is still dear to God, even behind her veil. As it says in Songs 4, behold, you are fair, my love. Behold, you are fair. You have dove's eyes behind your veil. Your hair are like flocks of goats going down from Mount Gilead. Sarah, in spite of her 90 years old, she still looks young and beautiful, so beautiful that the pagan king wants to kidnap her to make her his queen. This is an image of the Israel made young by the revelation of the Messiah. She will always be the wife of the youth. In Ezekiel 16 it says, Nevertheless, I will remember my covenant with you in the days of your youth, and I will establish an everlasting covenant with you. This new youth symbolizes a resurrection, a new birth through which the barren woman gives lives and produces sons for the kingdom. Romans 11:15, for if their casting away, meaning their rejection of the Messiah, according to David Stern's translation, for if their rejection of the Messiah be the world's reconciliation, what will be the reception of the Messiah by life from among the dead? When Israel is redeemed, she will take her place at the banquet of the banquet in the end times, in the company of those who will have joined the tent of Abraham based on their faith. And it shall be then that day in Hosea that you will call my husband and no more my master. And in Matthew 8, when Yeshua heard it, he marveled and said to those who followed, assuredly I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And I say to you that many will come from east and west and sit down with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who will partake to this banquet together with the company of the fathers of faith. And this leads us to one more time to the covenant between Abraham and Avimelech again. Second attempt. Right after the birth of Yitzchak and the rejection of Ishmael, Avimelech comes back into play and concludes a covenant with Abraham. So in light of what we have studied, we can discern another trick of the enemy. Yitzchak is born in the house of Abraham, so the promise was accomplished. Avimelech can only confess that God is definitely with Abraham. Avimelech has to face it. The promise of the son is indivisibly associated to the house of Israel. He failed in his attempt to adopt Sarah, the image of Israel, and he represents the enemy of our souls who wants to attack again. Thus, he finds a way to make Abraham fall by leading him to participate in a covenant that, according to tradition, would not have been wanted by God. Indeed, why does Avimelech consider it necessary to sign a covenant with an old and isolated man in such a radical way by making Abraham swear by the name of Elohim, which represents the measure of judgment and the law? Abraham is not yet a people nor a nation. It is indeed about a spiritual fight in which the outcome will happen with the return of Messiah. He will separate the sheep from the goats, midat din and midat chesed, the measure of judgment and measure of mercy. The oath is made with 7 lambs. Now therefore swear, ish avah, to me by God that you will not deal falsely with me, with my offspring, or with my posterity, me, my offspring, my posterity. Then Avraham set 7 sheva lambs of the flock by themselves. And then, therefore he called the place Beersheva. So the word oath here is related to the word 7. And 7 is, one more time, it's very deep in significance of the tree of life. But the 7th day is also Shabbat, which is the sign of the covenant between Israel and God. It is the symbol of God, creator of the universe. Avimelech binds Abraham to an oath he will have to respect until the completion of the terms of the covenant, no military intervention against the Philistines between 3 generations, me, my offspring, and my posterity. And this will develop the theme of the Philistine in the course on the mystical geography and history of the land of Israel, which is amazing to know all the words and about of the land of Israel. Even though the promise made to Abraham indicated that his posterity would not inherit from the land of promise until the 4th generation, Abraham should not have limited his descendants' rights to the conquest of the land of Canaan. Furthermore, right after this covenant, Abraham is tested with the sacrifice of Yitzchak. So his story will show that this oath prevented the Israelites from conquering Jerusalem in the days of Joshua, which at the time was occupied by the Philistine. The Jebusite would be descendant from the Philistine according to Rashi, until the time of King David. Why was it that God led them not by the way of the land of the Philistine, tells the Midrash? Because Avimelech's grandson was still alive then. And another Midrash notes that when these 7 sheep died, idolatrous images of them were placed at the entrance of Jerusalem, together with representation of the blind, representing Isaac, and the lame, representing Patriarch Jacob, thus preventing Abraham's descendants from possessing the city by reminding them of the patriarch's oath. At David's time, the Jebusites were no longer part of the third generation of Abimelech and were defeated by Joab. And the story of the city of David is just amazing, how spiritual, how deep it is. So it's also developed in our course on the mystical geography and history of the land of Israel. And prophetically, the city of Jerusalem, this is why also Jesus will make the miracle there. Prophetically, the city of Jerusalem, the city of the great king, will be a bone of contention until the end. So this is what it symbolizes. Islam and Rome, Ishmael and Esau, will fight for her until the end. Will she become a cup of drunkenness for all the people until the return of the King of Kings. And these events will trigger the return of Judah to their Messiah. Zechariah 12 tells us, "And I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only sons, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn." The dispute between Avimelech and Abraham is about a well. After his attempt to blemish Sarah, Avimelech tries to appropriate the source of inspiration. Jerusalem and the word of God are at stake. The well is very significant because it represents the source of purity of the doctrine and fecundity in biblical symbolism. It is always around the wells that the weddings of the patriarchs are happening. And Hashem himself is called the source of living water. Jeremiah 2:13, "For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters." At Jacob's well, Yeshua brings the Samaritan back to the source of inspiration, of which he is the author. Abraham makes a covenant with Avimelech that will cause a delay in the conquest of the holy city. This means that the cup has to be full before the liberation of Jerusalem and the return of the great king. Baruch Hashem, Jerusalem is now in our hand, but the fight is still going on. Israel will be delayed in a recognition of the Messiah and will have to go through many conquests and persecutions in the Promised Land. And if Jerusalem is to be a source of conflict for a time, the same cannot be said of the word. It stands no compromise. By making a covenant at the well, Abraham intimates to the Philistine king that the source of purity of the doctrine remains in his power. The place of the covenant is not called the covenant of the oath, but the source of the oath. To Israel belongs the source of the true doctrine that shoots out from the Torah. Even if Israel will be persecuted and Jerusalem conquered, the temples destroyed, and the Israelite people and the Jewish people scattered, the Torah will remain intact until the end of all things. As it says in Matthew, "For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will not means pass from the Torah till it's all fulfilled." So Israel was entrusted to watch over and keep this source. Romans 9 tells us who are Israelites, to whom pertain the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the Torah, the service of God, and the promises, of whom are the fathers, of whom, according to the flesh, Messiah came, who is over all the eternally blessed God. Amen. The source of this doctrine has been sought for 2,000 years by idolatrous roots and teachings that come from Babylon. I'm really encouraging you to purchase this book on Babylon, Yom Kippur, Babylon or Jerusalem, to understand what it is about. So the Babylonian doctrines have attempted to appropriate the word and have falsified all the message, calling for its blessing and leaving the curses for Israel. But the word is very clear. He who removes one commandment or adds one will be struck by the author of the word. Like it says in Deuteronomy 4, "Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the judgment which I teach you to observe, that you may live and go on and possess the land which the Lord God of your father is giving you. You shall not add the word which I command you, to the word, nor take from it, that you may keep the mitzvot of the Lord. And Revelation says the same. For I testify to everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to these things, the God will add to him the plagues that are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the works of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part from the book of life, from the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book. By glory to God, by bringing the woman back to the Jacob's well, Yeshua showed the way to come back to the source of life in him. In Psalm 36 he says, with you is the fountain of life, Mekor Chaim. In your light we see light. And in John he said, Yeshua answered to her, if you knew the gift of God, and who is to say to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Maim Chaim. God and his word are eternal, and in spite of the covenant with Avimelech, which causes a prophetic delay in the conquest of the great city, the word of God will still be fulfilled. We cannot say, oh, why is it that those scriptures are so rich and the Jews, they don't see the Messiah? They don't see the Messiah because God has put a veil for the moment, and a very, very thin veil. He is the one who allows it in order for all the brothers and sisters to come back home. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, that you should be wise in your own opinions. Don't say why they don't understand. The blindness in part has happened to Israel, because he allowed it, until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. Melogoim, which is the fulfillment of the prophecies given by Jacob to his son Ephraim, and Menashe will study it later. And so all Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from Jacob, for this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Concerning the good news, they are enemies for your sake, but concerning the election, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers, for the gifts and the calling of God as irrevocable. But before all this happen, Yitzchak, which is the image of Yeshua, must be offered in sacrifice. But this is for the rest of the study. I encourage you to study, to come, start with the 5 books of the Torah, and then you go with the course on the geography, mystical and geography and history of the land of Israel. Then you work with your sanctification with this formation that we are offering on the Tikkun HaNefesh, the restoration of the soul, and altogether we can advance in the word of God and have all the prophecy being unfulfilled before our eyes. So thank you very much. I hope you visit our website, like and share those videos, and Shabbat Shalom.